Welcome to Until Saturday. I am David Ubben. We've got a absolutely loaded show today. Alabama head coach Kalen DeBoer joins the program. We talked about Jalen Milroe's development, if Michael Penix taught him to rap, his most important memento, building rosters with their new GM, Courtney Morgan, and Wisconsin, who they play this week, a big non-conference test for both teams. And speaking of tests, week 3 has a lot of them. Manny Navarro joins us later in the show to break down Florida-Texas A&M, Boston College, and more. And what's going on with Florida State? I also asked him, how bad is the ACC really? And if they're really a one-bid league? It's an interesting debate at this point in the season. He's got some thoughts about the perception of the league and some stats that might surprise you. But before we get into those topics, we are here with the Athletics Notre Dame beat writer Pete Sampson. Notre Dame making some news for probably the wrong reasons. Over the weekend in South Bend, they lose to Northern Illinois and paid $1.4 million for the right to do that. Pete, if they had saved that money, maybe given Pete Sampson a check for $1.4 million, where does that money go?
Well, if Notre Dame could save it, I think there's a collective that they could probably put it into these days.
But if they gave it to you, what are you doing with the $1.4 million?
If they gave it to me, I would definitely install some sun coverings above the press box at Notre Dame, so I'm not staring into the sun for day games. That would be probably a few $100,000 right there. So after that, I've got 2 young kids. I got 529s that need to be funded. So I don't know how far $1.4 million is going to go in about 8 years.
If you got kids and you got 529s, your alternate plan for that is you could just go play for Colorado, Pete.
Okay. Yeah. That's my son we've kind of got my kid wants to sort of play football. We're like, how about flag? And he's like, how about if I'm the punter? I'm like, okay, that's probably fine. So we'll see where that goes.
Interesting conversations there. Pete, you were at Notre Dame Stadium on Saturday. I mean, for somebody who wasn't there, I was in Lincoln watching most of this game on my computer. What was that experience like, being in a stadium like that where there's sort of stunned silence?
Yeah, I mean, I've covered a handful of these games. The booing at halftime, you're like, okay, we're already there. You win at A&M a week earlier, and you're getting booed off at half in your home opener. It was very tense. I think there's different fan sentiments in stadiums, right? There's the disgust, there's the anger. And there's kind of like a hoodwinked vibe. And I think that Notre Dame's fans felt tricked. Okay, last week happened. That was supposed to be the over the hump win for Marcus Freeman. And then 7 days later, you're sitting there watching this. The quarterback that was supposed to be better than the last guy, who was supposed to be better than the last guy, turns out is just the next one. It felt like the fan base was coming to terms with the fact that everything that they had heard or read, some of it written by me in the offseason, was turning out to just kind of turn to ash in their mouth.
Mm-hmm. You wrote a column over the weekend, which if you haven't read it, I would encourage you to read. The link's in our show description. But it says Notre Dame has been here before under Marcus Freeman, and that's the problem. Memorably, he loses at home to Marshall, loses to Stanford, now Northern Illinois. These sort of unthinkable losses that a coach will erode his trust from his fans by losing those kinds of games where everyone just chalks it up to win. Nothing will cost you more goodwill than that quickly. What is it about Notre Dame under Freeman that for that 3 games and 2 and barely a little bit more seasons? What is it about this team that we see this more frequently than hardly anybody else, especially top 25 programs?
Yeah, I think it's inexperience at the head coach position is number one. And I don't think there's anything inherent to Notre Dame beyond that. Brian Kelly had no problem winning these games. His ACC win streak against unranked teams. I just think that Freeman is frankly immature as a head coach still. And this was supposed to be the year where he pushed this forward. So, you hear they had physical practices last week and you don't want them feeling too good about themselves after Texas A&M. But if you have physical unproductive practices, then they're you're
tired.
You're putting yourself behind the 8 ball immediately. So I just think that Freeman, you're seeing his inexperience as a head coach come through in these moments where he has not lived through this stuff before. Like Brian Kelly got to lose this game at Grand Valley when no one was paying attention. And then he lost it at Central Michigan when no one was paying attention. Freeman's losing it at Notre Dame when everyone's paying attention. And I think you're just sort of seeing that inexperience come through.
When you talk about inexperience, do you mean more kind of like you're talking about physical practices and how you come off of a win like Notre Dame, how you structure your season, or were there game day stuff and game management things that you feel like poked out that put them in trouble as well?
I mean, both. It's kind of harder to have a definitive comment on like what they did in practice because like we don't get to watch it. You just sort of hear rumblings on it. But okay, you've got a quarterback who clearly suffers some kind of injury at the beginning or the end of the second quarter. At that point, you've run him 10 times in the game. He's a running quarterback. You don't run him one more time the rest of the game. So if you have a dual threat quarterback who's really just a single threat and passing isn't his strength, like you need to make a change at that point. So I just think he hasn't lived through these stressful situations enough to sort of like, okay, if A, then B, and it's obviously a lot more complicated than that in college football. But I think that's the game day stuff probably sticks with you most because he just hasn't lived these scenarios before, and how to dig yourself out of them. And I think that really showed on Saturday.
1 to 10, how hot would you say Marcus Freeman's seat is at the moment?
I mean, it's like when people say hot seat, do you mean like this year? Like this could be
like
it? Hot seats?
Like what percentage chance that if they don't get into the playoff, that Notre Dame makes a change at the end of the season?
If they're, let's say they go 9-3 or 8-4 and miss the playoff, like 1%.
Okay,
like not hot. I do think it puts them on notice for 2025, though.
Yeah.
This was one. I think. I mean, you've covered Tennessee, so you know what these games are about. Like, there's always a moment where a loss happens. You're like, ooh, this might not work out. That doesn't mean it won't work out, but it starts to enter into your psyche of like, maybe this is not going to go the way everyone thought it would at the press conference. Yeah. And I think that's sort of what Saturday was for Notre Dame. It doesn't mean that it won't work out. I mean, Brian Kelly had that in year one here when he lost to Navy and Tulsa back to back. It worked out. Yeah. But I think that was kind of the thing that was most difficult for the fan base to process. It's just like they would like Marcus Freeman to work out.
I think
their Saturday, it's tough to know.
Yeah, I think year one, in any situation, I'm kind of willing to like, that was bad, and I'm locking it away, but I don't think that says a lot. The interesting thing, I remember after Tennessee lost to Georgia State in their opener in 2019, I think I wrote that Jeremy Pruitt now has to operate a program in an environment where suddenly he went from 0% of the people that he's dealing with or his constituents believing that he is not good enough to do that job to, I don't know what the percentage is, but it's high. Do you feel like this was a game where you feel like now, what percent before Saturday did Marcus Freeman have of Notre Dame fans, boosters, stakeholders that had big questions about him being able to do the job versus now?
I would say he probably went into the season around 90% approval rating among that group.
Yeah.
You beat A&M, then you're up to 98?
Yeah.
Like that was the game everyone was waiting to see. At this point, the percent at 65, I don't really know. But it was a precipitous drop. Like when you're getting text messages from these stakeholders, like I'm stunned or I can't believe that happened. Like that's not a good spot to be. And when you covered Pruitt, that wasn't even in the NIL space. Like,
well,
Notre Dame needs to raise money to, I guess it was always the NIL space at Tennessee.
Yeah.
Notre Dame, like to then have to go and ask for like, hey, we need another defensive end next year. Or we need another 2 wide receivers. Like, I don't know what kind of response they're going to get at that point after a game like this, because it's an ROI question, and that ROI suddenly is a lot lower.
I also write our bubble watch, Pete, and I downgraded Notre Dame from definitely in to, I think it was in the mix this week. The math is still on their side. The math is still very much on their side. The question is, what is the team that is going to be on the field. I think if the team that beat Texas A&M shows up, they can probably still finish 10-2. Obviously, if the team that shows up against Northern Illinois, we might be talking about 7-5, 6-6. What do you make of Notre Dame's playoff chances as somebody who has seen this team, very informed about this team? I still think they get to 10-2, they're in. The committee does not care who you lose to. They don't have a ton of quality wins, but like we'll see what Louisville is, we'll see what USC is, we'll see what Florida State becomes, all those things. What do you make of Notre Dame's road to the playoff at this point?
I mean, they have to throw a touchdown pass first. Like
start there. Yeah.
Yeah. So I feel like they still have an 11-1 defense. Like the defense isn't quite as like lights out as I thought they were going to be. Their defensive line should be elite, and it's just like solid to good. Offensively, they're much worse than I would have thought. They have like a 6-6 offense right now. So unless something changes in personnel or performance there, I don't think that they have a path to the playoff. And look, they've played 2 games. Their offensive line went from 6 career starts to 11 career starts, and they'll go to 16 career starts this weekend. That's still not a lot. So there's still some upside there. But I just have real questions about Riley Leonard at this point, if he's going to be the guy that they thought they were getting. And I mean, I remember talking to his offense coordinator at Duke last offseason, and he's like, look, I love coaching this kid. He's a phenomenal athlete, but he's a developmental passer. And you're like, okay, like, well, they'll just develop like that. That won't be a problem. And I think we saw this with Sam Hartman last year.
Yeah.
That, guys are who they are. Like, just because you change colors doesn't mean your game changes. Like DJ Uiagalelei is the same guy that he was at the end of Clemson. Guys just don't change. And I think the idea that Riley Leonard suddenly is going to turn into like this dual threat, potentially game changing quarterback after the last 2 weeks, and then after his career at Duke, I think that's just asking too much of him.
Yeah. On the subject, go back on to Freeman's future, Pete Bavacqua comes in, Jack Swarbrick going out. How does that dynamic kind of affect where Notre Dame is? I think Notre Dame is a different kind of place. And I think certainly when you have a new athletic director at most places, that means you have a more tenuous connection with your boss, and that boss might want to get his guy in there. But at Notre Dame, it's a little bit different. How would you describe the dynamic there with bringing in a new athletic director, especially after having one like Jack Swarbrick for so long?
Yeah, I don't think it's like the classic new AD, head coach lost a game, look out. Freeman and Bavacqua have sort of been cordial for a while, like a couple of years now. When you're the head of NBC Sports, like you're sort of like the Notre Dame athletic director already, just like in the media department. So I don't think there's much of an issue there. I mean, Notre Dame also has a new president. I don't think that's like at other schools either, in part because it's a priest. So yeah, I don't think that the new leadership, the head coach better look out because they're going to want to install their own guy. Like, I don't think that will play a whole lot into like what happens with Freeman, positively or negatively.
So I like talking to Pete. Pete, you got always get your pulse on Notre Dame is a weird place, and I haven't spent a lot of time around it. So all of the dynamics are like a little bit different than every other place in college football. And Pete always helps us understand. Pete, on Leonard, I mean, what's going on there? Even if you have a guy that's limited as a passer, and even if he is a little bit banged up, we've still seen him look a lot better at Duke and be a guy that obviously was an impact player. Even if he's limited as a passer, that threat of the running can open things up downfield. What in your mind is the reason why through 2 games they have looked so, I don't know, just it's just not good.
No, they've been bad. But I guess it's like you sort of at A&M, they sort of look that way by design because they're like, I don't know if we can block these guys. We're going to have to throw screen passes on 3rd and 12.
Yeah.
Just don't turn the ball over. Like that made sense. That was just sort of like calling the game you had to call, not the game you wanted to if you're Mike Denbrock. But last week, I think you started to see Leonard bail out of the pocket early when there was no, like the pocket was going to close, but he had a couple more beats to find somebody, and his default was like, I'm going to spin out of here. His throwing mechanics is not my opinion. This is an opinion of like former coaches that I've talked to, are very inconsistent. You see him sort of like ground balls. The interception that turned into Northern Illinois' game-winning drive was just like unfathomable for a college senior to throw. Not the decision, just like it was about 10 yards too short. So that, and I don't think Leonard has a lot of trust in what's around him. And it was, I mean, one of the more ominous things in retrospect that I heard in the preseason was Mike Denbrock was asked about Jaden Daniels and like his improvement from year 1 to year 2. And he referenced a game where LSU played at Auburn where I think Daniels threw for like 80 yards or something. It was like 9 of 20 or 8 of 20 or something like that.
I remember that game. Yeah.
Yeah. But Denbrock was like, once he started to trust his receivers, like it all changed, but like you need time to get there. And like, it's like, you saw this in year 2 when like you threw gasoline in the fire, he wins the Heisman Trophy. There isn't a year 2 here. Like this is it for Riley Leonard. So it's like when that part of it, I think would be pretty concerning if you're Notre Dame, that the development that Riley Leonard needs, he's not going to be able to get because one, he didn't have an offseason at all because of the second ankle surgery. But on top of that, it's just like, even if he did, that's still not enough time to sort of have everything developed and clean the way that you need it to be a true playoff contender.
One of the things that I think some people underrate with Jaden Daniels and LSU is, he had Brian Thomas, he had really good receivers, and Malik Neighbors,
There's no
all
Malik
those
Neighbors
guys
on Notre Dame's roster.
I didn't love their weapons at Notre Dame in general coming into the season. There's certainly not a Malik Neighbors, but there's not even really a Michael Meyer either. But what do you make of what's around him and maybe the things that Mike Denbrock can do to maybe establish that trust, knowing that you might not have a healthy quarterback, you might not have a year 2, but like you still gotta make chicken salad somehow.
Yeah, I mean, you still like Mitchell Evans is a big time tight end, but he tore his ACL at the end of October last year. So last week he went from I think 10 snaps at A&M to maybe like 25, 30 against Northern Illinois. Like he's somebody that should never come off the field, but like he's still getting back to being able to never come off the field. So that hurts a little bit. He had 2 third down conversions last week, when Notre Dame really needed it, making contested catches. Like that's big. Bo Collins, I think, has been really good. Probably better than expected. I thought Jaden Greathouse, their slot receiver, would be better. He had a pretty bad drop last weekend, but it's like you should be able to drop one pass and have the offense function. And it just feels like Notre Dame has very little margin for error right now offensively, where just like one mistake is a drive killer that they can't sort of dig out of a hole of their own making. So yeah, I think the weapons around him they're fine. They're certainly good enough to have 1 touchdown reception, and Notre Dame doesn't have that yet.
Yeah. I don't know how in this conversation we ended up talking about the Jeremy Pruitt era at Tennessee so much, but it's kind of sounding like it. And I say this to say one of the things that he would always talk about is, well, the offense is close, but just like the reason why it's not working is, well, one guy missed a block or one guy ran the wrong route or our running back missed a protection call or something like that. And like one thing would go wrong. And I'm like, your offense should still be able to be good if one guy screws up, because most of the time there's probably going to be 1 to 3 guys. It's college football.
Right.
It's a chaotic sport. There's going to be, it's 18 to 22. There's going to be 1 to 3 guys who screw up something on every single play. So when you look at what Mike Denbrock wanted this offense to be and what he wanted it to look like, how does that compare with what we've seen through 2 games, and where can it go?
It's Leonard, the runner, has been about what I expected. Like dynamic, a huge part of the offense.
Yeah.
The 2 running backs I think are very good. Jeremiah Love in particular, and that's like you look at the touchdowns that they've scored this year. There's only been 4 of them, but it's Jeremiah Love hurdling a dude and then taking it in, or Jadarian Price running away from 3 Texas A&M like quality defenders, just like leaving them flat-footed and blowing by them. They have I think, very high-end running backs. I think the receivers are just okay. I hate to put it all on the quarterback, but like when you go back and rewatch the games, it's not like there are receivers running open all over the place, but there are receivers running open where Leonard just doesn't see them at all, or sees them like a beat too late,
or doesn't trust them.
Or just doesn't trust them that they're going to beat the man that they're supposed to beat. There's just like the pieces are not fitting together right now. But I don't think like the idea for the offense is bad. I just think that the quarterback and the receivers don't trust each other, or certainly the quarterback doesn't trust the receivers at the level he needs to right now.
Pete, I got to put you on the spot. You're talking me out of Notre Dame being able to squeak its way into the playoff. I got to tell you, but I'll put you on the spot. At this point in the season, with all the variables that you don't know, give me a % chance that Notre Dame cracks the playoff.
I'll say 20%. So it's not off the table entirely. I just think that they're more of a long shot than what the math. Like, I know we have at the Athletic, we've got our playoff predictor and percentages and all that. I think they're like 35%. To me, that feels too high. Because it's just like, you're not going to look at Notre Dame's schedule. There are a lot of games that are essentially 3-foot putts, and Marcus Freeman has not been very good at making 3-foot putts. And you have to make all of them until you get to USC to have a chance. And I think even then, unless maybe Northern Illinois wins the MAC and A&M goes 10-2, like if those two things happen, then the math changes. That doesn't have anything to do with Notre Dame, but Notre Dame really, they have to win not 8 games in a row now before they get to USC. They'll be favored in all of them, but they have to win all of them. And Marcus Freeman, I think his longest winning streak is 5 games. So it's kind of hard to look at Notre Dame and be like, okay, I see that they have the material to get on a run and not have an inexcusable out of nowhere loss when we've sort of seen one of those every 7 or 8 games.
Yeah. I think Notre Dame's they look to me like if you're really good on one side of the ball, well, we'll say defense. We'll stick with Notre Dame, kind of like Iowa last year. You're really good at defense. You can stay in a lot of games.
Yeah.
But if you can only put up 24, like on your best day, well, we saw college football is a chaotic sport. A lot of things can go wrong. 1 or 2 plays can all of a sudden put you in real trouble, like the pick that set up the North Dakota State play at the North Illinois play at the end. So
Notre Dame should have more margin for error than. Like, I understand the A&M game was a low margin for error game, and that's fine. Like, that's how you need to play that game. Last week shouldn't have been that. They're playing at Purdue, Miami of Ohio, Stanford, Georgia Tech, Navy. Like, those shouldn't be low margin for error games, but I think that they probably will the way the offense is operating.
Not good trend lines. Not good trend lines there. No. Well, you can read Pete at The Athletic, or you can listen to him on The Independent with Matt Fortuna. Pete, thanks for joining us. It is always a pleasure to talk to you. I feel like I learned something today. I feel like I hope our listeners did as well. Stick with us. Alabama coach Kalen DeBoer coming up next right after these messages. Well, on today's show, we got a very special guest, Alabama head coach Kalen DeBoer. I've heard you're new to the gig, Kalen. That's what I've heard. I'm told that. And I'll ask you this question. If you see me frantically scribbling, you'll understand why. But what question have you been asked most often since you got to Alabama, and what's your attitude kind of toward that question?
Yeah, a lot of questions that have been asked. Are you settled in? You got a house? That's the non-football stuff. A lot of it, getting used to the heat, down here in Tuscaloosa. So a lot of those have been the common ones. And of course, then it gets to the team and just, how are the guys doing and all that kind of stuff. You kind of get the same ones over. Now that we get in the season, it changes it up a little bit, and that's all good.
You guys got a big one this week against Wisconsin. But this program is in the spotlight so much, obviously, because of what Nick Saban did and the nature of this program. But what have you learned about this program and the environment around Tuscaloosa and Alabama from being inside of it that you didn't know kind of from the outside looking in?
Yeah, it's just fun being around the passion. I mean, I knew that there was passion, so I'm not really stating anything I didn't know. And I know that's the question, but just it's fun being around the passion. You want to be around a place that has a fan base, just all the support around you. The love for football. It's Alabama. It's Alabama football, and the NFL. It's a few hours each direction before you hit anything like that. This is kind of the show. So that's been fun. I think when it comes to our players, just everything that they do, it is so amazing. The respect they have for each other, what their individual goals are, what our aspirations are as a team, and everything goes into each and every day. Just trying to meet those goals, their aspirations. They respect each other so much. I think that's one thing I've been really impressed with.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure since you've taken over, you've gotten a lot of people reaching out. Maybe some prompted, some unprompted with words of advice. I'm sure some better than others. But what's the best piece of advice that you feel like you've gotten since taking this job that you can hear kind of in your head more often than you thought you might?
Just continue to do what we've been doing. I think, whether it was before I got here and just kind of those first couple weeks, be you. But then once I kind of just was doing it how I've done it in the past, and embracing the tradition and embracing everything about Alabama football. And that's the only way I know it. And that's why I came here, is to do exactly that and take on the responsibility of carrying on the tradition. I think that's probably the advice that I've heard the most, is just stay the course. And so we're doing that. And it doesn't mean that, it's always perfect. We saw that this weekend, did play our best game, but we stayed the course even within the game itself, and found a way to win. So proud of the guys there. And I think that's the job, no matter what, whether it's in the middle of the game, whether it's the off season, whether it's, in the middle of the season. So that's what we got to do, is continue to just stay the course.
As you've stayed the course throughout your career, I mean, the coaching profession can take you a lot of places. And I've heard the one thing that comes with you, it was your first recruiting letter from the late Bob Young, one of your mentors, somebody that you played for and coached under, and you've kept that in your desk. Why that memento, and what does that mean to you?
Well, I think early on, back many years ago, I just wanted to make sure it didn't get lost. And then it didn't get lost when I moved from office to office, and over the last 15 years in particular. But then I think especially over the last 5 to 10, as I really understood what Coach Young meant to me, and really kind of reflect on that process of being a player for him, and then also working under him for 5 years, taking over him for 5 more. I think all of that just means so much more. Whenever I do get a chance, pretty much every day, you open the drawer and you see it, it gives you a lot of those feelings that I've just said, stay the course. That comes from him, stay the course, keep the faith. That's what he always said. And so I think it's kind of shaped and changed a little bit for different reasons. One, I wanted to keep the letter, make sure I always had it with me and not lose it. And then second of all, I think it's just a good reminder of, the why I coach.
When you think about that why, what is that why?
For these players, the impact of the lives that they have and where they're at right now. And I think it's one of the most impactful times of their life, where they're on their own, they're away from home. We're not their parents, but we're an extension of them. And this is a time that, they get a chance to choose to come here and play college football, something that they love to do, at the same time get their education. And we're helping them set up, life, whether it's football or not football. And that impact is, I think, during these years when I was a player, that's exactly what it was all about. And it's one of the greatest experiences of my life, playing college football. And that's what we're trying to do for these guys.
Well, when you think about the lessons that you learned in taking over for him at Sioux Falls and taking over somebody so beloved by a community, what were some of the things that you learned in that experience that you want to apply to a situation here where obviously you're taking over somebody that means a lot to the community that you're stepping into?
Yeah, I think it was really easy to embrace everything back there at Sioux Falls because I had been a part of it. It was my alma mater as well. But I think I really understood, having gone through that, what that meant, taking over a program as a head coach. I think as an assistant, it's still some of that. But I think as a head coach, having just that, that respect for all the alumni, for everyone that's poured so much in the program, all the former coaches, head coaches, assistant coaches, just embracing that, because it's a place that hopefully they can always come back to and it be home. And that's just been something that's been so important to me, whether it's at Fresno State, Washington, here. I just want to carry that on, and anyone who's poured into this program, I want them to always continue to feel part of it.
Coaching's a tough business, especially starting out. For you, I've heard the stories. You build lockers back at Sioux Falls and laying concrete and all that stuff. And every coach you talk to at some point has to decide, like, am I in? Am I out? Do I want to do this? And that sort of, I think all of us, when we look at our lives, we think about alternate paths. What's the closest you came to maybe leaving coaching early in your career? And if you weren't in coaching, what do you think you would be doing?
Sure. Yeah. I think I'd be coaching, working. It'd be something to do with sports. There's certainly been tough times, places you've been where you're trying to build a program or you go through hard seasons. I can't say that I would be out of coaching completely. But I think it's something. I just love the game so much. And that's why I got into it originally when I was really young. Some way, form or fashion, I'm sure it's teaching or something like that. So I love doing what I do. And I can't say I would know what I would do if it wasn't for this.
Nick Sheridan comes over with you, obviously from Washington. You bring in Kane Womack, who was a sitting head coach. You guys were all together at Indiana in 2019, obviously with Michael Penix as well. What about that season kind of made you want to get the band back together this year? And when you were putting together your staff at Alabama, call upon some of those experiences that you had in Bloomington?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good question. We had Dave Ballou too, as our head strength coach here. He was at Indiana that year. I think it really, that's not the intention. Was like I know that's what it looks like, is get the band back together. I don't even know if that's really how I thought of it. I was originally bringing Ryan Grubb as the coordinator, who is now with the Seattle Seahawks. And Nick, was certainly coming with, because I think he's a brilliant mind. But that just kind of worked out that way. I do know this. I know that time at Indiana, you really, as an assistant, get to work alongside people. And as a coordinator, I was working next to Nick in the offensive staff room every single day, understood who he was, the person, the mindset he had, whether it's just, work ethic, but also just from a football perspective. And then knowing what type of team player and football mind Kane Womack was as well. And coming in, knowing that the offense, needed maybe some work a little bit there. And Kane just saying, hey, whatever you need, I'm ready to help you. That meant a lot to me coming in and help ease that transition. And so I know he's going to take care of his side of the ball, and Nick's going to take care of his side. But in the end, they're just great people, and they care about the team first, and they'll work together, and that will trickle down through the staff. They're just great leaders in all those ways, alongside of being just experts when it comes to the game of football.
How long were you guys together in Bloomington before you're kind of thinking, man, like, these are people that I really align with and would love a chance to work with, again, or as long as I can, I guess?
Yeah, I think very quickly. I mean, within a couple of weeks, you just see people for who they are, and you enjoy not just them, but you enjoy their families. And, I think that says a lot about who they are as people too. And, it didn't take long for me to know that these are, top tier coaches. And, it's going to be a lot of fun coaching with them that season. And fortunately, again, we're back together.
Tom Allen's up at Penn State. Do you guys ever FaceTime with him?
I haven't lately, no. But I have no problem. I mean, Tom Allen's going to be a great friend forever. Giving me that opportunity, and I'll always be a fan. That's for sure. Great coach, great human being. and loved my time there working for him. Taught me a lot. Just like a lot of the coaches that I've been as an assistant with, taught me a lot about football and how to be a head coach. During that time.
Damian Harris joined our show this year, and he's one of a lot of really great players that come through Alabama, guys who call it home, and it means a lot to them. But you didn't coach those guys, even though you guys are at a place that means a lot to a lot of people. How do you kind of bridge that gap to maintain those relationships with as many guys who have had such successful football careers that are still playing or recently retired, and maintain that those relationships with the program and that tradition at Alabama?
Yeah, and just when they come by, getting to know them, taking some time, hearing their stories. It's been a lot of fun getting them in front of the team, to share not just with me, but the players, what their, keys were to winning championships and what they love about Alabama. And so, that's key. And anytime you get a chance to connect with guys, whether it's, right now, before games, after games, during the week, in the off season, it was fun meeting a lot of the alumni as well. So I enjoy it. I enjoy it a lot.
Mm-hmm. Was there anybody so far that's come through that's been a former player that maybe you didn't know before that's had kind of a big impact on you, or whose words you felt kind of hit you pretty hard?
Well, I think most of them I didn't know. Really all of them I didn't know.
Yeah.
So it's been fun seeing the guys that are still playing and getting to know them. We had Mark Ingram. I think if I was going to single one out, he came and spoke to our team, had a great message during fall camp. And I know there's so many others that have given me just, good little nuggets on what, made their team special or what drove them to be great. I could go on and on, but Mark did speak to our team. And so, kind of singling him out, and what he did here was pretty special.
Yeah. What was his message and what made it resonate so much?
Yeah, just everything for the team. It's all the things that the great ones do. It's about the team and the sacrifice you had to make. The journey and the steps that it took to actually get, to the point of winning championships or win a championship. And so it didn't just happen overnight. I think a lot of the times when I talk to guys, the years that they won a championship followed up a year that maybe they fell short, or, and looking back on it, they're like, we weren't there yet. We had to continue to work, and we needed this element of who we were and that steps along the way to really take place. I think it's hard to skip steps to win a championship. Been part of some at different levels, and it's skipping steps to win a conference championship is hard. If you were just kind of a team that hadn't been there and you're there, I was fortunate to win some of those, but these guys all kind of have the same message: the sacrifice, the commitment, just the journey and how hard it is, but how awesome it is when you get there.
Mm-hmm. For so many coaches, when they're hired, you're hired to fix things. I wrote a little bit about your time at Washington and how you built them into a playoff team so quickly. But you took over that program, which was in need of some life. And at Alabama, what is it like when you show up to Alabama? You look at your roster, the state of the program, and you see something that not a lot of people are asking to be fixed. What is that dynamic like when you show up and sort of sit down and see what's in front of you?
Yeah, I think every program is made up of teams, right? And this is the 2024 team, and the program is in a great. It was in a great place. Coach Saban and just all the things he did when he won championships, he kept adding to it. He didn't settle for just like, okay. And then the sport he had, they didn't just say, well, it worked now, so let's just keep doing what we're doing. They kept the progress of the program, whether it was facilities or staffing, you name it, just kept moving it forward. But I think this is about the 2024 team, as part of the program. And we're just taking those steps right now that it takes. We're going to have some great moments. We're going to have some ones where we just got to keep fighting, keep playing, keep getting better. As long as we stick together, I do feel like we got a chance to be pretty special. You got to always catch breaks. I think any championship team catches breaks, whether it's injuries, whether it's winning close games, getting a break to go your way. Those things are part of championship teams, and there's going to be adversity for every championship team in some form or fashion. So us sticking together, that's going to be what's critical. And I think there's a lot of talent here. I think the want to, I'm never going to question the desire and hopes of doing something special here with this group of guys, because I think they've been through a lot of adversity, even in the last 9 months already. And so it's fun being alongside of them. Love going to battle with these guys, even just through 2 games.
Mm-hmm. How is that challenge different of building that 2024 team? You know, when you have a program that is in good shape, but obviously there's expectation, and there are, you know, guys that are coming there to win championships and all those things, versus when you take over a program where, you know, you're starting where, you know, there's a lot of things that have to fix. How is that challenge kind of different?
Yeah, it kind of like I just referred, every team is its own team. And so you would start over whether this was my 3rd or 4th year or now my 1st. You know, you would really focus on the leaders that are coming up and emerging. There's obviously guys every year that are going to leave. And so, you know, focusing on the strengths. And we have great strengths, you know, and there's areas where we got youth. There's areas where there's mixing and matching of players that have a lot of experience with ones that maybe were in the program that don't. And so, you know, that's what we're working through right now. And the expectations are the same. You know, we expect great things, but really what you got to do is you got to peel it back to the day-to-day, just work that you got to put in, trying to improve every moment you get a chance to step on the football field. Just all the details that go into being successful.
Mm-hmm. When you took over this offense, you know, obviously you've made a lot of your reputation on your play and your ability to develop quarterbacks. What did you see in Jalen Milroe that you took over, and where do you feel like he needs to develop, you know, as his career progresses in Tuscaloosa?
Well, he's got some tools that are really uncommon, and he can throw the ball. He's got some zip on it. He's got accuracy. He can put it where he wants down the field. He had great deep ball skills a year ago that showed up, and he's shown that already this year some in just 2 games. He obviously, I think, what sticks out to a lot of people is his ability to run too. And, you know, really meshing those things together is the trick, right? Is, you know, where's that balance? Because we have other great skill players that we want to make sure get their opportunities to help us win football games. We need to make it to where, you know, everything doesn't fall on Jalen, even though he is the driver of the offense. And so using his skill sets and at the right time is critical in the big moments, especially with his legs, but also I think just helping him balance, you know, and know, you know, hey, the key is move the chains. But when he moves the chains, sometimes that moving the chains isn't 10 yards, it's 70, you know, and you know, then when do I gotta, based on the situation we're in, keep my eyes downfield because we got, you know, a third and 7, and I'm only going to get about 2 yards if I take off. But if I keep my eyes downfield and draw the defense to me, you know, I can make a throw with my arm and conversion that way. So I think that's the thing with him is just, you know, him learning our scheme, him being more comfortable each and every day with it, which I think is happening. And just the more he is, the more that's just going to continue to spread amongst our whole offense.
Mm-hmm. You guys made a big commitment to your GM, Courtney Morgan, to keep him around. What makes him such a good evaluator? And as you guys sort of look at roster construction and building this program.
Yeah, his attention to detail. He's an evaluator of talent. I think he sees the things, you know, saw this back, especially when you don't get to get everyone that you want at a Fresno State, you know, finding those, I don't want to call it diamonds in the rough, but the ones that, you know, maybe don't have all the stars, but have a lot of potential. I think even when you get the top tier talent and you're reevaluating, deciding between, you know, player A or player B, and who really is the one that's the best fit or the one that you'd like to have. I think there's an eye for that. And, you know, it comes through a lot of work that's been done in evaluation. He's got a history, you know, he's done a lot of it. And he continues to really take a lot of pride in evaluating, assessing skill sets. But then I think there's the next piece. It's like who they are as a person. And then also the relationship development. And it's just natural for him. He loves doing it. He takes great pleasure in building those relationships. He does a great job leading a team, whether it's his recruiting staff or leading our, staff as a team in the recruitment of our prospects, and so it's something I guess he just does, not just a small piece of it. He just does a great job of bringing it all together. And, I know he appreciates the freedom I give to him, but I also know that he'll come to me, with the decisions he's making and maybe just kind of the plans that we are looking at to make sure we're all on the same page.
Mm-hmm. When you talk about that attention to detail, what's an example of that? Because I think people, they look at recruiting and roster management, and it's like, well, there's Jadeveon Clowney. He's a freak and he runs a 4.3 and he's 6'4", 260. Or there's Derrick Henry. He seems like he's an impossible specimen. When you look at the attention to detail, what are some of the things that stand out or that he's looking for that you can remember in your time with him that really impressed you that people might overlook that aren't as good at his job as he is?
Yeah, I think there's coaches that have conversations with prospects, and then I think there's a different conversations that prospects have with non-coaches. As much as he's seen as a coach, as a football guy, I think there's things that conversations he just gets into that give us another element and aspect on top of the skill that the player has, that we see, the agility, the hand-eye coordination, the ability to defend and the footwork and all that stuff that coaches do a great job evaluating. And then I think he also does a great job of understanding our roster, what really fits us, and has a great ear for what he hears on the offensive side and the defensive side as he meets with those sides of the ball. And they're continuing to recruit and talk about our team and know what the areas are maybe that we want to fill the gaps with the next, recruit. And, is it height? Is it speed? What is it? And do we want guys that are all the same in that position group, or we want mixes and matches of different types and body types, skill sets, within a certain room. So he does a great job, not just with the recruitment, but also understanding, who we have in our program, and where those gaps are that we want to fill with each recruiting class.
Mm-hmm. In terms of roster management, how would you describe your approach to the transfer portal and how you want to use that tool in your program, big picture?
Yeah. To me, it starts with high school recruiting, especially here at Alabama.
Yeah.
You got to have that foundation. We will bring in highly skilled high school players that can play right away. We have that happening right now. Many freshmen that are on the football field making an impact for us already in the first 2 games. And so it starts with that. But when you need a spot in a room maybe to be filled with some experience, guys who've been in the fire before, we're gonna look at the transfer portal, and not gonna have a whole team full of those guys. I think when those guys come in, they need to be impact players, because that's probably what they're looking for, is an opportunity right now, step on the football field. And I think for the most part, we've done that, and just finding, again, that right match, that right mix of people, and what their goals are and what we could provide for them here at Alabama.
Mm-hmm. As you've studied, Wisconsin for this weekend, they've been one of the more interesting transitions in college football. What have you made of their offensive shift from being the Ron Dane, Melvin Gordon, Wisconsin that people got to know, to the air raid and kind of mixing in some concepts like that, and the kind of transition the program is undergoing?
Yeah, we're just getting into it here early in the week, but understanding what that philosophy is. I still feel like they're really trying to work towards making sure that element of physical football, a rushing attack exists within the framework of what the air raid system is too. And mixing and matching that. So I feel like you can have a balance of that. I think, to me, it's about creating an attitude, and that's what I hope want us to be, is a team that creates an attitude, has that ability to run or pass based on whatever the defense has given us. So it's going to be a great test for us this week to defend their offense, the explosiveness and the way they'll spread you out, but also the physicality that I know they want to have. as Wisconsin football. And that test is going to be front and center here Saturday.
Mm-hmm. A couple quick ones before we let you go, Coach. I appreciate the time. Michael Penix gets a chance to start for the Falcons this year. What would be your piece of advice for him before his first start?
Just be him. That's what I told him every time I see him. Is just be him. What his skill set's good enough. His personality's great. He's been through the fire in every way possible. And he's prepared for whatever comes his way.
Mm-hmm. Did you pick up any freestyle rap skills from him? He's got some talent there.
He's got talent. Yeah, he's got talent. I don't have that. That would definitely be an area that is lacking on my end, and would be a mockery if I tried to do anything like he does. So in that area,
sounds good.
So, yeah,
I gotta close with some Kalen DeBoer trivia. A topic you might know a lot about. A lot of people might not realize you're an All-American receiver at Sioux Falls, but you also played some Frontier League baseball, the Canton Crocodiles, if I have that correct. My numbers say you had a .272 batting average and a .400 on base percentage, but you also had one home run. Do you remember who you hit the home run against, Coach?
I hit it in Evansville, Indiana. Evansville, Indiana. So
what do you remember about that moment?
I do remember. I remember that's where what's the movie? Is it A League of Their Own was filmed?
Yeah.
And that's a cool moment. So yeah, it's a great time. I love it.
What's the experience of being a minor league baseball player like, and how does that inform your coaching life now?
Yeah, it was a quick, short summer. I didn't play all the way through the season, but it was you really respect to the guys that are coming up through the ranks in that sport in particular because of all the levels.
Mm-hmm.
But just meeting a lot of new people. And I think that's been something that I've taken wherever I go. Just enjoy the different people you come across, and it's also been kind of cool reconnected with a couple of those guys, even from that short season here over the past couple of years, as well, as they kind of follow what I'm doing and I'm following what they're doing. Some of them still in baseball.
Mm-hmm. I feel like the Canton Crocodiles would have a great logo. So if you got any gear, I think we'll take some.
I don't have a lot. I think I got a hat or two. That's about it.
Well, that's been Kalen DeBoer, Alabama head coach. Alabama plays Wisconsin this weekend. Should be a great game. Kalen, thank you for coming on the show. We really appreciate it. Great to talk to you. Good luck this year, and it's going to be fun to watch you guys. I suspect we're going to see you guys playing a lot of football this year.
Awesome. Appreciate having me on. Roll Tide.
Welcome back, and we are joined by Manny Navarro, Miami resident, ACC guru. You and your colleague Grace Rayner do ACC power rankings every week. It's a good read to give you a sense of the league. And Manny, right now people are beating up on the ACC. If the geography jokes to begin the season were not enough, now they have provided some fodder on the field. Mostly Clemson, mostly Florida State. But you sent out this tweet on Sunday, Manny, and I will sort of just read the highlights. The ACC is 5-5 against other Power 4 schools. The Big 10, 4-4. Big 12, 5-5. SEC, 5-5. I think a lot of that, obviously, is focused on the teams at the top, but they've had some good wins. Manny, what should people know about the ACC that they are not talking about enough right now?
Well, just that it's not as bad as maybe everybody's making it out to be. Yes, NC State and Clemson got their clocks cleaned by two SEC schools on national television in huge matchups. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the conference as a whole is garbage, which I think people just automatically assume because you don't have enough teams in the top 10 or the top 15, then, you're not worthy, right? You're garbage. You should only have one representative in the 12-team playoff. And I think that's absolutely ridiculous, Dave, because first of all, we continue to generate all these opinions off of preseason rankings. And I think we've reached an era now in college football that we really don't know year to year who is going to be good. We have an idea of who the, top 5 or 6 teams are every year because they recruit at an elite level. They sign elite transfers every offseason. Like, you have a pretty good idea, right? But beyond that, to just generalize and say, well, the ACC, they probably only deserve one team this year. how can you make that judgment after just a couple weeks? There's a lot of football left to be played, and I think to just sort of generate this idea from the start that it's garbage is just bad.
Yeah, I think I saw kind of a similar dynamic. Early in my career, I covered the Big 12, and anytime Texas and Oklahoma were down, you'd hear kind of the same conversation. Well, it didn't matter that like TCU was really good, or Baylor was really good, or like in 2010, 2011. When Oklahoma State was peaking with Brandon Weeden and Justin Blackman with teams that were national title caliber. Obviously 14. The TCU Baylor controversy getting squeezed out of the playoff. And I think something similar is happening with the ACC. Now, I still have some questions about the second class of the ACC, but you look at that total record. I think there's so much focus on Florida State, and there's so much focus on Clemson getting eviscerated by Georgia that we brought it up week 1, coming off of that week that that looked bad for Clemson, but Georgia has done. We've seen this before. They literally did this to Oregon, and Oregon, people didn't take them seriously for a month. There's all these questions about Dan Lanning, and we're here a couple years later, and Dan Lanning, I think a lot of people would say, is one of the 5 most promising coaches in the sport. So it's interesting. But on the playoff conversation, Manny, we don't really know how those narratives are going to play out. If you have an ACC or a Big 12 that only gets one team in the playoff, we'll kind of see how that plays nationally in the 12-team playoff era. But do you feel like, what percent chance do you see that where the ACC could cannibalize itself and we could see, only Clemson get in, or only the ACC champion? I mean, who jumps out to you as a team, that has a great shot at getting an at-large bid if they're not Clemson, if they're not Miami at the top? Does anybody jump out to you?
Well, I think especially now that Notre Dame just lost to Northern Illinois, I think Louisville certainly has an opportunity to make a case for itself this season. They do have to go play in South Bend, but it's clearly not the same sort of tough game maybe that everybody thought after Notre Dame won on the road at Texas A&M. So I think Louisville certainly has an opportunity. I think Syracuse has looked really good with Kyle McCord at quarterback, and he's looked unbelievable as far as a passer is concerned. I'm not saying Syracuse is going to win the ACC or necessarily go 11-1 and make a strong case for it, but they've been a pretty good team too, and we've got to see what they look like going forward. So I just think to just sort of make this predetermination, hey, the ACC is a crap conference is a bad look for a lot of people. It's just creating this bias that doesn't need to be there. And I certainly think, Miami and Clemson are both very talented programs that are capable of winning 10, 11 games this year and being in the conversation at the end. I think there will be a conversation to have 2 ACC teams in. I don't think this is just a one team conference this year.
Yeah. We saw Georgia Tech beat Florida State, obviously, in the opener. We saw Virginia beating Wake Forest, but Syracuse, you mentioned them. There was so much juice for them in the offseason and around Fran Brown, putting together a really interesting staff, being pretty serious about recruiting, talking about recruiting in a way that we haven't really seen a Syracuse coach talk in a long time. And then obviously his ties to the South and Georgia. And they finally got a little bit of a moment, Manny. We saw one after they beat Georgia Tech. Fran Brown was feeling himself at the post-game mic. I liked what we saw there. Let's take a listen to that.
Because when he's going for it, he's saying, I'm tougher than you. I'm about to go for it. And then I'm saying, when we go for it, we're tougher than you. And who won the most fourth down this day? We did, yeah, because he said he wanted to fight from 2 out of 4. So that's all I was thinking about from 2 out of 4. That's why I was and you know me. So it's a big difference. When you know who I am and you come at me about toughness, like, don't do that. I took this game was very personable. And then you know that I coach with Kirby Smart and Muschamp. So why would we not be a tough physical football team? That's just what they do, and that's what we're about, and that's where I was at. And I did take that very personal. And I want to make sure everyone understands that when you play us, just be quiet. So then that way we're just going to go worry about us throughout the week. Don't give no ammo to me. If you give ammo to me, I'm coming.
Hang on, I gotta call somebody. I just ran through a wall. I'm sorry. Fran Brown, man, I tell you, if Syracuse gets it going, man, first of all, I don't want to be this guy, but Fran Brown is not going to be long for Syracuse if he gets it hot there. But I like their team, and you're right. He's talking about popping champagne with Kyle McCord. I was a little bit, we'll see after week 1, but some of the throws he made in that game, I like. I mean, Kyle McCord was dealing on Saturday, and that was so Syracuse. I think right now, in that second class of the ACC, at least in perception at the moment, they're one of the more interesting teams to me. Georgia Tech we'll kind of see on, but Manny, we got some big games this weekend, including, if we're talking perception, Memphis. A lot of the talk for them all offseason was, well, they got the Florida State game. If they can win that one or be close, it's a little bit like Boise and Oregon. And now they've watched their marquee game turn into a game where I think people are going to hold it against this Memphis team if they don't win. And maybe that changes, but maybe that changes if Florida State gets it together and goes 9-3, but I don't think that's going to happen. But the stakes of this game are very interesting now, Manny.
Yeah, there's no question, and these are really huge stakes for Mike Norvell because let's not forget he coached at Memphis. That was his program before he came over to Florida State, and Florida State is well publicized in Bruce Feldman's article last week. Spent a ton of money in the NIL to build this elite defensive line. They obviously paid DJ Uiagalelei money to come over, and thought that ultimately this train was just going to keep rolling the way it did last year. And to lose to Memphis at home would be an absolute death blow, I think, to Florida State at this point, because yes, they're not going to be a playoff team this year. They're not going to come back and go 10-2, but it kills your recruiting. It kills your momentum as a program. And they took such huge leaps the last 2 years to win, first to win 10 games 2 years ago, and then to go 13-0 before, everybody decided to sit out of the Orange Bowl and they got slaughtered by Georgia. So I think for Mike Norvell, this is a turning point moment, this game. He better win. He better beat Memphis on Saturday.
Well, remember, all our lines are presented by BetMGM. Florida State, a 6.5-point favorite. I don't know if there were preseason lines on this game, Manny, but it's got to be one of the biggest movers. Memphis has looked pretty good. I would guess it was 14, 17 maybe to start the season, maybe something similar to Oregon and Boise. If you're Florida State in this game, I'm worried about you because this is Memphis' Super Bowl. And for Florida State, you're still trying to kind of pick yourself up off the mat a little bit. Let's go contrarian here, Manny. What have you liked from Florida State? Because I watched them through the first 2 weeks and I had a lot of questions about what are you good at? When you've watched Florida State, is there anything you've seen that can be encouraging for the Noles?
Special teams? Does that count? No.
I don't know. Maybe.
I think, look, the one thing you can say about Florida State is, yes, they haven't gotten to the quarterback enough. Yes, that defensive line, they've given up a bunch of rushing yards. I think they've also done enough to keep their offense in games. My issue is with their offense. I think defensively, I see more potential for them to turn things around and to have a better season on that side of the football. I think Adam Fuller's a really good coach. I think right now he's just not getting the most out of that group, especially at linebacker. Yeah, they missed some dudes there. But again, offense is the one that I'm much more worried about because I don't know that DJU is ever really going to turn things around as far as being a passer. And so they don't have enough explosiveness. They just finished losing Jalen Lucas for the season, who's one of their top transfers, their running back. That's a big injury for them. He was a playmaker. So, this is going to have to be a defensive turnaround for Florida State.
Yeah. You mentioned the recruiting. 5-star defensive end Javion Hilson also decommitted over the weekend. The vibes are not this is where Florida State is in a tough spot because the vibes are really not good. And Mike Norvell had some struggles before cracking through last season. But you got to ride this out. The dude, I keep coming back to, none of what has happened this year is acceptable. But the guy went 13-0 last year. Yeah. And yes, you can question, are we relying too much on the portal? Is Norvell maybe overrated based on one season? All those questions I think are fair. But you got to ride it out with Norvell for a long, at least 2-3 years before you can have a real serious conversation, I think. But I keep laughing about it, and it's kind of funny, but I don't think Florida State fans are laughing. It is a what have you done for me lately business. And in Florida State, some of the worst vibes imaginable at this point for Florida State.
I think people are definitely joking. Like, who has the worst buyout right now? Is it Florida State or Florida? Like, we thought Billy Napier, $26 million was a lot of money, but if they wanted to get rid of Napier at the end of the season, I mean, it'd be triple that.
Yeah. Well, that seems like a good segue, Manny. Not an ACC game, but still a very interesting game. And I suppose we have to start here. I mean, we talked about this all, I think, last year, some in the offseason. I believe you referred to it, Manny, as the DJ Lagway Life Preserver. And on the sinking SS Gators, Billy Napier threw it out last week against Samford. I didn't watch this game. I saw some of the Lagway highlights after, but I was tracking it, and it was like 14-0 in the third quarter, if I recall. I was thinking
14-0.
I bet that's not. Yeah, I was like, that's not going to go over well. But Manny Lagway, so we kind of knew he had the tools. He's a big dude, got a big arm. He can run. Like the Cam Newton, Anthony Richardson comparisons, unfair in reality, but that just gives you a sense of the kind of player that he is. Tools is one thing. He was making some plays, and I don't know that the hype is quite like when Anthony Richardson walked on the field and ran for an 80-yard touchdown, like one of those first games. But you could definitely see it. And I think that you're in a tough spot here because I think Graham Mertz is a good player. He has exceeded your expectation. But you're in a spot where you do kind of have to sell the future and throw that life preserver out and maybe build for that future. Do you think that Lagway, leaning on him a little more heavily, he's not going to start, I believe. He said they're going to split time this week. Right. But leaning on him a little more heavily in the next month, do you think that there's a real sense that the life preserver can keep Napier afloat at Florida for one more season if you see, this guy's got some juice to him?
I think so. I think if he is playing well and they play close to 500 football with a freshman quarterback and things are looking up in Gainesville versus the way it looked against Miami, where I think everyone was stunned that it was as lopsided as it was. I think for sure you have to consider keeping things going with Billy Napier. I mean, look, they invested a lot of money in this guy. It's still a huge buyout to get rid of him at the end of the season, $26 million. That doesn't include the next coach. I think if DJ Lagway becomes a star and we're talking about, hey, I can't wait to see what this guy looks like next year, and Florida can start selling transfers and recruits on coming to play with DJ Lagway, then you've saved your program, right? You've done it. You've done what you needed to do in year 3 from a tough schedule, tough situation standpoint if you're Billy Napier. But if Graham Mertz comes back and he's the starter on Saturday and DJ Lagway is just sitting there and Florida's losing to Texas A&M by 3 touchdowns, then you have to get rid of Billy Napier because he's obviously not doing what he needs to do to save himself and the program. And we talked about this a year ago. I said it several times on this show. Like, DJ Lagway is Florida at this point. Like, he has to be everything that the Gators are. He has to be the front man. And if he isn't, he's going to go somewhere else, and this program is going to look completely different next year.
Here's the question, though, Manny, is now Florida and NIL have had a complicated relationship, and and this is definitely NIL in gigantic quotation marks. But couldn't you say, okay, maybe we bring in a more proven coach, maybe somebody that coaches near the Grove who might have a top 10 team sniffing around, and maybe you find out what you have in Lagway, but maybe you do everything in your power to keep him, and then maybe bring somebody else in next year. I think that, to me, that's a more attractive maybe option, because despite Billy Napier seemingly doing all the things that you would need to do to succeed in the SEC, the results have not been there. The recruiting class kind of falls apart late. Obviously, the win-loss stuff on the field has been the biggest negative. But I think that the idea that, ushering out Napier means ushering out Lagway, I think is too presumptive. And I think there's things you can do to keep him versus, hiring a guy that has a proven track record of developing quarterbacks, an offensive coach, and then the NIL piece to make sure that somebody doesn't buy you out. You are Florida. Again, complicated relationship with that. What do you make of that alternate theory of what Florida can do moving forward?
Well, that would be the best case scenario, right? But I think the fly in the ointment here is the fact that Lane Kiffin has a top top 5 team in the country this year, and is going to make the 12-team playoff. And his focus is not going to be on what's next. It's going to be on, can I win a national championship at Ole Miss? And so I think that's the issue for Florida here. And people have talked about Jedd Fisch potentially being another option, just taking the job at Washington. I could see that much more of a likely scenario than Lane Kiffin coming to Florida, especially in light of the team that he has there. I'm not saying it won't happen, but if Ole Miss is 11-1 and they're playing in the SEC championship and they're going to the playoff, like everybody thinks they're going to do, then I don't understand how you sort of get all these ducks in a row behind the scenes, and that's having covered the Mario Cristobal to Miami situation just a few years ago when Oregon was playing in the Pac-12 championship game. At least there you knew, well, this is different. Mario's coming home, right? He's coming to Miami. Lane Kiffin, like you could potentially say he's got something better at Ole Miss than he does at Florida. I mean, the Gators just have so much more to go, and they don't even have a school president yet. Like that's another huge hire. Like, what do you do with athletic director? There's just a lot more possibilities with Lane Kiffin staying at Ole Miss than I think coming to Florida.
A lot of big questions at Florida. Yeah. On the other side of that matchup, I think is somewhat interesting. Texas A&M was in kind of a similar spot last year, decided to pay the $75 million to get rid of Jimbo, and now they are in a new era. This is sort of, I'm not going to call it a year zero for Texas A&M, but I think the question for Mike Elko is, after you lose to Notre Dame, and Notre Dame losing doesn't help you because it feels a little bit, that loss was a little worse now. I think from the Aggies, you got like kind of a minorly frustrated sigh.
Yeah.
You lose to Florida, I think you're going to get some real grumbling. What do you make of the Aggies situation? I didn't watch much of the McNeese game. Didn't love the numbers from Connor Wegman, but also I think you're playing McNeese State. You're going to, not really. That's not going to be a game that defines your season. But for you, when you look at A&M, what's on tap? What's on what's at stake for them in this game? Where Texas A&M kind of looks at Florida and sees themselves a year ago in the mirror, I think, a little bit.
Yeah, I think for Mike Elko, like, it's just getting the kinks out, right? Like, it's getting the team to really start playing the way you want them to play. And I think offensively, I mean, look, they faced a pretty good Notre Dame defense. Losing the home opener, disappointing, certainly, but this is the type of Florida team that you can go in and beat, certainly. They're not offensively, even with DJ Lagway, I still think there's severe limitations to what they can do. The right side of their offensive line is not very good at Florida. So I could see this as a situation where you go in there and you finally get the kind of pressure on the other quarterback that you want to get and create some turnovers and win this game easily. But I think Texas A&M, the upside of Texas A&M right now is a little higher than it is of Florida. So I would take that situation in a heartbeat over what the Gators are dealing with.
Another big ACC game this weekend, not in ACC country, but BC goes to Mizzou, return game from 2021, and BC beat Mizzou in Boston in overtime. I feel like I remember it was like a crazy kick that sent that game to overtime from somebody, 50-yard plus. Either way, I think my biggest question coming into this game, I don't know that we're going to learn a ton about Mizzou. I mean, if Mizzou struggles in this game, then I think that will kind of raise people's antennae. But I don't know how good BC is. I think they're pretty good. I've liked Thomas Castellanos, but Missouri's going to be a different challenge than Florida State was. They'll certainly be more tough in the running game. Mizzou right now, the only team in the country to play 2 games and have yet to give up a point. So defensively, we'll kind of see there. Corey Batum, nice start for him as DC. So Manny, I'll take it to the big picture question. How good is BC?
Yeah, it's a great question. I know Chris Vanini loves them, right? I mean,
he's all in.
He's all in on BC. Look, Bill O'Brien is going to do well, I think, at BC. And I thought, this is the type of season where he could win probably 7-8 games because he has Castellanos back and he's got a lot of veteran guys back, including guys on his defensive line. It was just about going out and actually proving it. And the win at Florida State was really impressive because they controlled the line of scrimmage, and that's supposed to be, one of Florida State's strengths. So I'm very interested to see what they look like against Missouri, who's obviously hasn't allowed a point yet. I think Castellanos is going to create a lot of trouble for Missouri because the fact that he's such a threat to run the football. I think every defense in college football struggles with mobile quarterbacks in some capacity. Yeah. So, I think for me, I want to see if BC can keep this close. Missouri's, number 6 ranked team in the country. They're good. They're proved it last year. Like, this is not a joke. What the Tigers have been able to do and the type of build that Drinkwitz has done there. So to me, if BC keeps this within a touchdown in the fourth quarter and they're in it, then I think we got to take it as BC's for real, right? I mean, that's how I would take it. I think if this is anything more than that and they're not competitive in the second half, then we know what BC is.
Remember, all our lines presented by BetMGM. BC a 16.5 point underdog in that game. I kind of feel bad for Mizzou in this game because if it is close, people are going to kind of be raising their eyebrows at Mizzou and kind of being like, well, maybe because I think the talk around Mizzou is like, well, they could sneak into the playoff, but a lot of it is because their schedule is pretty easy. Despite you're losing Cody Schrader. Well, the health of Luther Burden and Theo Weiss is kind of up for grabs there. Not real sure how healthy those guys will be. But if you're Mizzou and you win this game by 30, right, I kind of think, perhaps unfairly, that the takeaway is going to be like, wow, Florida State really is bad. I feel like it's going to go straight to Florida State if they do win this game. It's like, how bad are the Noles actually? So I kind of feel bad for Mizzou in this game because I think whatever you do, you're not going to really get credit for a win. And certainly if you lose or if it's tight, I think you're gonna be downgraded on a BC team that might be pretty good. I'm kind of with you on that. I don't know where that ceiling is for them, but I think they're definitely competent and definitely I would say to go back to our ACC preview shows, I would say they're friskier than I thought they would be coming into this year.
Listen, they did a good job last year. They almost beat Florida State last year at home, and that was a much better Florida State team. And again, Bill O'Brien has proven it at the college level he can coach. So I think to just sit here and say BC is not a good team, I think they proved it against Florida State, the way they control the line of scrimmage, that they're at least a respectable team. You can't disrespect BC.
Been a great show. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for Manny Navarro. Thank you to Pete Sampson. And of course, thank you to Alabama coach Kalen DeBoer. It's great to have him on the show and catch up with him as well. If you are not already subscribed to us, first of all, I'm going to choose to not take offense to that, but you should change that immediately. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Overcast, anywhere you get podcasts, we're going to be there, and you should subscribe to us. Also, subscribe to us on YouTube. We're still pushing for that 10K mark. We love hearing from you guys, and we love you interacting with you. And you can see our smiling faces on the YouTubes, the interfaces, all of the social media platforms that Bill Belichick frequents. And our voicemail line remains open, 316-462-9852. We had some great voicemails on our reaction show this week. If you're leaving a stadium, if you're sitting in a rural basement in Central Florida, wherever you're at, leave us a good voicemail, and we will play the best ones on our show. Thank you for tuning in. Again, for Manny, for Kalen, for Pete, I'm David Ubben. We'll see you guys again on Thursday for our picks show with Damian Harris and Chris Vanini. And no matter what happens, I'll be bringing back the turnover chain. I hope Miami does too. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll see you on Thursday.